So this week, like all the other weeks, I'm going to go over the important concepts from this week's module, the things that were confusing or muddy in my brain, and then the discussion question that I came up with. So some important terms for this week, obviously, was disaster myths, which is pretty much just a myth or belief about a disaster that people assume to be true. And it usually portrays people that are in a disaster in a weak light. And another important term was evacuation, which is the primary protective action against disaster. And it occurs when individuals from a prescribed area are forced to leave because of a real or anticipated hazard. And another important term was the warning response as a four-stage process. And those four stages are risk identification, risk assessment, risk reduction, and protective response. And then another term that was important was disaster shock, which I think is a really important thing to know because in a disaster, I feel like a lot of people do go in shock. So it pretty much is a state of shock when a sudden event happens, not being able to think clearly, follow directions. When something crazy happens, sometimes you just lose your mind and don't know what to do. So I thought that was a really important term for this module for just everyone to understand. And it goes hand in hand with disaster myths because everyone has kind of a view of what happens when people go in disaster, but no one really can understand it unless they went through something in that state of shock as well. So a terms or something I learned that was a little bit muddy for me, I guess would be the myths and realities of disaster response. I thought that was interesting because, I don't know, I feel like personally I didn't really think of people that went through a disaster in a negative light or a weak light. I thought of them, I don't know, I just thought like how you could help them, not, wow, this person's super weak because they went through this disaster, they reacted this way. Like, you really can't understand what someone's going through unless you're in their shoes. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't really feel like I thought that way. But I can see how people would. I mean, overgeneralizing it, and sometimes the media portrays how people react in disasters as crazy and dramatic, and that might not always be the case. I mean, sometimes it is, but who knows how we all would react in disaster. I don't know how I would react, so who am I to judge? So that was an interesting topic that I kind of, I don't know, I had to think about a little bit and do some self-reflection and see what I personally thought about that topic. And then the discussion question I would ask if I was leading a class would be, what are the myths that you've heard about disaster? Or do you have any examples of movies or TV shows or news articles that have put people in disaster in a weak light or overgeneralize them or put a negative connotation along with them being involved in a disaster? I think it'd be really interesting to hear everyone's response. Thanks!